Good evening, welcome to KTN News. My name is Jimmy Mbogo. We have an amazing conversation for you this evening on issues to do with urban population and urban planning. But first, now the Kenya Urban Forum is set to take place from the 14th of June to the 16th of June, as of 2023. Now, as of 2021, an estimated 609 million people were living in urban centers across the continent. Now, Kenya's urban population, as of 2021, was 15,102,890, a 3.78% increase from the 14,553,419 in 2020. Now, this number is expected to rise, and that is why we are having the conversation we are having today about urban planning. My guest this evening, we have Joakim Nyarangi from the Kenya Institute of Planners, council member and immediate former president. Joakim, welcome to KTN.
Thank you very much.
All right, and also next to me is Professor Lawrence Esho, also a member of the Kenya Institute of Planners.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, karibuni sana to the program. Now, first things first, let's have I want to get your assessment of Kenya's urban planning. Where are we? I'll start with you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. I think it's a common assertion by many Kenyans that Kenya is poorly planned. So, because of the many problems we have in our urban setting, that comes down to not so much poor planning, because plans are prepared every other day, but the implementation of the same is what is lacking. So we are very good at making plans, but we don't allocate funding for plan implementation. That has improved over the last 20 years, of course. We have a number of programs like the Kenya Municipal Program, Kenya Urban Support Program, and the Kenya Informal Settlements Program, which has attempted to handle matters of plan implementations, to link planning to budgets, to projects, and then realize some of those aspirations or plans.
All right, Prof, it's a good thing that you touched on the issue of budget. Again, we expect the budget to be read sometime next week. But first, I want to bring you, Joakim, into this conversation now. I want to get your initial assessment. When you look at our urban centers in the country, are they well planned out?
Well, I think that's a very clear situation that they are not well planned. And by well planned, I don't mean the documentation. I'm talking about what my senior just mentioned about implementation, all right? And so our urban areas, our cities, are actually a burden to our people. On the issue of plan implementation, one of the biggest things is capacity of cities to undertake development control and enforce some of the things. And we have developments coming up in places they should not be. Riparian reserves, we've seen developments coming up there. We have areas that are developed without social facilities and utilities. So the state of planning in the actual sense where planning is implementation, is actually seeing the school, seeing the home, seeing the hospital, is in a that situation. But we have an opportunity. It's not unredeemable.
Yeah. All right, and it's a good thing that you talk about some of these social amenities that we expect in any urban center. Yeah. But when you look at the country, first of all, when you look at our urban centers, we're talking Nairobi, we're talking Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, the four major cities that we have. There is something that is sort of clear that cuts across all these cities, and that is the issue of slums. Yes. In all these cities, we have a certain section that we know that is a slum. Don't go there. All right? So, Prof, when you look at some of our slums in the cities, in Nairobi alone, we understand that majority of our population lives in those informal settlements. Where did we go wrong? How did we get it so wrong?
Yes. I think it's a historical problem. We inherited a legacy of segregation in urban planning, whereby then in our colonial era, the better neighborhoods were reserved for white settlers, and then the African particularly was not even allowed to be in the city. And if he was in the city, he was put in estates that didn't have services at all. Now, when we became independent, we should have resolved that. Yeah. But there was an influx of rural populations coming into the city, because obviously they thought the great city lights, they followed the great city lights, which means they thought the urban was where the benefits were. for a better life. So we have not overcome that legacy of segregation, and we have continued to reinforce it in the modern age. As you know, Kenya is a very capitalistic state. We are not socialists.
Yeah.
Socialists tend to plan very well and try to resolve these issues. But in a capitalist state, the market is the one that dictates. And we have, that's part of the challenge of our planning legacy, that, you know, we have not thought of how to eradicate slums. And we are 60 years too late in so doing. So as a result then, the more we urbanize, the more the proportion of people living in slums increases. So something has to be done. Otherwise, if it's not done, we will only have a greater percentage of people living in the cities, but in squalid conditions that we've experienced so far.
All right, and Prof, of course, we'll be talking about how do we then make sure that we improve these living standards of Kenyans,
Yes.
and how do we then eradicate the issue of slums. Now, Joram, for the longest time, and this has been part of our curriculum, going to school days, we've always had this conversation about rural-urban migration. Now, as it is, we're talking about a phenomenon that is going on globally, where we expect that about 70% of the global population will be living in urban centers. How then do we prepare for this?
Yeah, and in fact, the statistics are there for African, because Africa is the most urbanizing continent, and you look at the African context, Kenya is significantly playing in that. If the status quo remains, the situation will not be sustainable. 60% in informal settlements, that's around 9 to 10 million people, around 1.8 to 2 million people. The situation is not going to. We have to make hard decisions. Hard decisions now. We want to, and one of the essence of the Kenya Urban Forum is to bring policymakers and decision makers on the table on a call to action. Okay, we have all these solutions and they're a bit isolated. So the government is doing something on their side, the county is trying to do something on their side, private sector is doing something on their side. Can we come together to coordinate and synergize to have this solution? I also want to put it that it's so that we have to do something in the next 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, urbanization is still rapidly going on, haphazard and controlled. Now it has gone, and since devolution, it has now come from Nairobi and going to the counties, and you see Kiambu urbanizing so fast, and counties that were previously food secure are now threatened by starvation, and so it's a situation that we need to make a decision on immediately.
All right, Prof, I want to get your thoughts in terms of what would it cost to properly plan urban centers. What needs to happen for us to be at the same level with the developed world? We're talking when you go to countries such as Europe, where even a rural town looks like a city somewhere in Africa. So what needs to happen?
Yes. As my colleague mentioned, Kenya is a very rural-focused country. You remember during the 80s, we had rural-focused strategy for rural development. And we have maintained that. We still look at the rural because that's where the majority of the population is. 70% of the population is rural. But we need to focus on the urban because urban areas present economies of agglomeration. They actually present, they are hubs where we can get better services because assuming a kilometer of road in the rural areas may serve about 5,000 people, but in an urban setting will serve about 100,000 people. Water also. More people will have access to better services in small areas. Now, what needs to happen? There are so many answers to that question, but I want to concentrate on one. Funding. If you do not change the focus from rural to urban, and we deliberately need to do so because, as you was talking about food security, we have turned our grain baskets into urban settlements, into human settlements. Kiambu is a typical case, which was the grocery garden for Nairobi, but is urbanizing at a very fast rate. So we need to free up our rural land for agriculture, and we need to bring people to urban areas. But funding is very key. County governments need to allocate funds, adequate funds, for improving conditions in our urban areas so that they can attract more people. National government needs to have projects that create employment within urban centers because people also cannot go to cities to do nothing. We need to create industries to promote industrialization, which normally happens in urban areas, so that then people can have employment opportunities in urban centers. We need to invest heavily in infrastructure, in housing, so that people can have better living standards in our urban areas.
All right. Joachim, when you look back at the history of Kenya, particularly when you look at urban centers, we're talking Nairobi, again, of course, Mombasa, and up to now, when you go to Mombasa, you will still see a sense of the structure that was the plan that was initially there. Who dropped the ball?
Well, that's a tricky question. Who dropped the ball? Government. So we had a very good urbanization strategy prepared in the 70s that I identified which are the cities, which are the municipalities, which are the towns. And as human settlements were now around 70s and 80s there, I think people are left on their own. I don't know what policies changed at that time, and people are left on their own. And Kenyans are very innovative and very industrious. They won't just die hungry. So you now have centers that have come up as late as early 90s, and they are now more prime than the centers that had been allocated before. And you know, when a center is allocated, it is very functional. So it has a school, it has administration offices, you know, and these are cases we're seeing. Look, if you, Bomet, for example, there's a huge center, Longisa, that is now almost dead because a center emerged Mulot and has taken up all the functions. But we need to go back. The other bit is capacity in the county and the local governments to enforce development control and to undertake enforcement. We have you'll be shocked at the statistics that the counties have in terms of professionals that are required to undertake these things. And some of the reasons we are seeing now collapsing buildings and situations that are not sustainable. So capacity, when we let go of the policy of an urbanization strategy and also capacity. But as I said, it's not too late. So we need to go back and have a very clear urbanization strategy for this country. Where are the cities? And not just cities coming up. We want functional cities. So there's no need for Eldoret, which is becoming a city, to have the same commercial and administrative functions as Nairobi. It's a sports, its main global name is on sports. Can it be a sports city for East Africa? And we have functional cities. We don't need to have everything clammed up in Nairobi. Can the judiciary go to and give function to another city? That will be able to expand sustainability.
All right, Prof, with devolution, there is something that came, and this is the issue of every country rather wanting to be self-sufficient. Is this also a problem that is contributing to this menace that we are having, where we have urban centers that are not well thought out, the roads that are impassable, buildings that are in the middle of the road? What is not happening?
Yeah, devolution has been a big opportunity, a boon for urbanization, because money has been devolved to the counties, if we could say that way. So now the consumption in the counties is much higher. There's more expendable income, thereby making business more profitable. So investors have also moved to these rural capitals, regional capitals. So in a sense, devolution is a very big opportunity. However, there was a lacuna in the constitution, in the sense that we eradicated what was working in the urban, and then it has been left now to a statute to recreate it, namely the Urban Areas and Cities Act. We used to have municipalities which were very vibrant. They had mayors, and now the constitution was very silent on that, and it left it to parliament to legislate and figure out how cities and urban areas will be run. Now, the net effect is, over the last 10 years, we've been trying to establish urban management boards. I doubt that many people are even aware of their existence, but they're there. We have urban management boards which have chairs, and you have an urban manager or a town manager or a city manager. The challenge has been, again, the question of funding. County governments are profiting from the cities by taxing businesses, but they are not plowing back the same money back into the cities. They steal the rural focus. A lot of Kenyans generally do not consider a city as a home. A city is a house. It is where they go to work, but home is where you come from in the rural areas. So there's a lot of money taken back to rural areas instead of just being used, and it's collected from cities. So with the devolution, I think what counties can do is put greater emphasis on urban areas, both in terms of investing in the necessary infrastructure to spur growth and to attract business and to attract industries, so that jobs can be created. And then we can mop up a lot of population from rural areas and free, as I said, that land for agricultural production. Otherwise, our food security, we have become a net importer of food, while we used to be an exporter of food. If you look at Nakuru County, for instance, which is the most urbanized county in the country, actually, but somehow Nakuru has lost its position as Kenya's grain basket. Now that has been taken over, let's say, by Trans Nzoia, by Uasin Gishu, by Narok. But initially, it was Nakuru that fed this nation. So there is that disconnect between, we need to implement a very clear urbanization policy, which is there in place, just awaiting implementation, and creating the structures, urban structures, giving them some degree of autonomy so they can run their own affairs and improve the lives of those people who are living there.
Joachim, do you share in the same sentiments of Prof that counties actually squandered an opportunity that they could have come up with proper plans, that they would have gotten it right where Nairobi got it wrong?
Yes, that is very clear that the last 10 years, the opportunity in the urban areas was not maximized. In each and every county, the biggest revenue comes from the urban areas. Yet a small percentage goes back into that. And we have these issues of, poor sanitation, no water in those areas. And it was a very good opportunity to, even as we are now discussing on source revenue, from urbanization, you can get even much more revenue collection. But it has to be a people-led participatory planning for implementation and enforcement. So they missed a big chance, and I want to say I'm very glad as an institute we reach out to the incoming counties, and most of them are alive now to the situation that was, and they are willing to change. Hence, even the Kenya Urban Forum, where we'll also be discussing this with the counties and how we're able to support them to rapidly plan for implementation.
All right, and of course, in the second part of this conversation, we'll be talking about what the conference is seeking to address. Okay. But Prof, again, when you look at some of these counties, one of the biggest source of revenue is licensing. You want a building license, we'll come and give it to you. Do you think that also played a role in terms of, we have so many apartments coming up, they're not planned, the roads are still the same, they're not done. So do you feel that that also played a role in just making, we sort of converting this country into an urban slum, if you would?
Yes. I think that's a good way to say it. First, there has to be a change in mindset. We are saying, in the conference, we are saying the future is urban, but I will say the future is now. We are 60 years late in terms of urbanization. The rest of the world is above 70% urbanized. Yeah. Okay, Kenya is about 30% or thereabout. So we are running behind schedule in terms of urbanizing this country. But we need to match resources. If you collect revenue from people, from shop owners, you better provide the services which they want, they are looking forward to. We need to pave our streets. And that shouldn't be so difficult, because a lot of shop owners actually pave the spaces in between their shops and the road. Yeah. Only for county to come and collect taxes, parking fees for spaces which they have not created. So what we are simply saying is that the county governments need to give some degree of autonomy to urban management boards and allocate enough funds for them to be able to actually improve conditions in our urban areas.
All right, now it's we have been touching on the issue of funding and the issue of money. Now let's talk about something that we really need to understand, and we probably need to underscore a bit more in the second half, which is the role, the opportunity that is then there for the private sector to come in. And how do we rope in the private sector and ensure that they are part and parcel of making sure that we convert our urban slums into proper urban centers, well thought out, with social amenities that we require, with proper paved roads? John?
Yeah. So, and I think we have a very, very bold private sector, because they're putting investments into urban areas without a very clear, predictable framework. So they're very bold, but they must be seeing something. I think for the private sector, the bottom line has to be clear. So Kenyans, especially Kenyan urbanites, can pay. They need to be facilitated, and urban areas then provide these spaces. What we are seeing now in the situation of hazard and controlled development is detrimental. in fact, the private sector has come out to the Institute of Planners to just try to support planning in the county, so that it's predictable. When you're investing in a hotel, it's very clear. It's here, and this is why this place is optimal for that. If you want to invest in a high-rise, it's here, and that's why this is very optimal. And it's a lot for some. When investments like in Nairobi, looking at the land values, you'll get an investment of around 800 to 1 billion, and by the time that person wants to start constructing, then he's given conditions not to. So it becomes a situation that is not tenable for private. But the opportunity in the industry of Kenyans, of urbanites, of Nairobians, to be able to support investments is real. And in fact, we need to entice private sector into social services, building of markets, because stall owners in the proper market will be able, they pay in bus parks. Right, the situation that we have now, bus parks on the road reserves, this should be provided for clearly, and from the numbers of scale, the scale of numbers, will be able to have profitable ventures. The investment opportunity in urbanization is real, and Africa is actually the investment destination. And when you say Africa, it is the urban area mostly.
All right, Prof, let's talk about something that, of course, plays a big role into what we are seeing, and that is the question of governance. Now, we have a city like Nairobi that would say, okay, we have the plans, but then most of the land is private. All right, so where is the disconnect in terms of the city might want to upgrade, the city might want to build and pave the roads, but they're saying this is private property. So what needs to happen to make sure that we both do not interfere with private property and at the same time we keep a city that is sane?
You see, normally through the role of government is to facilitate development. So if I was to come and tell you need to set back your plot, your building, by 1 or 2 meters so that I can provide a proper pavement for people to walk, which is your customers who will be accessing that building, or I can build a sewage line, then I have no objection for that. If there is going to be an enhancement in the quality of my plot because of the investment by government, then I have no objection to that. Remember that most of the money that government invests in the city still comes from private sector, isn't it?
Yeah.
So urban governments like the city of Nairobi needs to work very closely with plot owners so that there is a win-win situation. A conversation needs to happen. I think there is a tendency for people to see government as a separate entity, a separate animal, and that's governance. Government is us, and governance is about the people. Okay, it's not about a certain group of people that we vote for, then they become these separate kinds of people who we call Mheshimiwa. The Mheshimiwa is actually the person generating the money, which is the building owner, the shopkeeper, and things like that. So I think there needs to be a change in attitude so that we look at the urban dwellers, urban residents, business owners as the prime movers in the urban scene. So that then we involve them, we get more inclusive decision-making processes.
All right, Joachim, as a city dweller and of course as a resident of Nairobi, which I want to believe you are a resident of Nairobi, are you satisfied with the services that you're getting? In 1 minute before we go for a break.
All right, so I used to be a resident of Nairobi. I've moved to the new city. I'm now in Nakuru, and for obvious reason, it was not working. The congestion, it's really not working, but there's still, as I said, there is still opportunity, but we are now, there's also greater need for focus on what you're calling secondary cities, intermediary cities like Kisumu, Eldoret, and Nakuru. These are also going to be the next best centers of sustainable urbanization. In fact, in our global discourse, Nakuru city is already being picked as an African city. We want it to be developed as an African city, and it's a big challenge that we want to take it up with the county on doing that, and also doing the right things. I think the governor, Her Excellency Honorable Susan Keyekes, is doing very well, because now there's an effort to do a vision, an Nakuru City Vision 2050. So that way will bring people into the buy-in and into the conversation, and they're able to feel part of of the solution.
All right, and of course we'll talk about what happened to Nakuru. It used to be known as the cleanest city or the cleanest town in Kenya. We want to understand what happened. We take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the role of the private sector, the kind of funds that needs to come into making these cities work for Africa and work for Kenyans.